All right, we're going to begin on page 4. At the top it says Notes on Ruth, Dr. John McLean, copyright 2006, which means that you can't use this as firewood or kindling. Now, I created 4 basic sections to my outline, and 1 through 22. Naomi believes the hand of the Lord has gone forth against her because of the death of her husband and sons. That is my summary exegetical statement for the whole chapter. I divided it into 4 sections. 1:1, Elimelech and family leave Bethlehem to Moab. Naomi, Ruth, and Orpah or Orpha, if you use the Hebrew F, are bereft of their husbands. And then Orpha returns to her people as Naomi plans to return to Bethlehem. You could include Orpha returns while Ruth stays. I'm sorry, I have that is the next one. 1:4, Ruth commits herself to Naomi and the Lord. And then Naomi returns in bitterness to Bethlehem, 1:19 through 22. So I divided it into 5 sub-points. You could easily combine 1:1 and 1:2. That wouldn't be any problem. What you want to do is to divide them into paragraph units as well as into preachable units. Now, we also have then, I always include the verse. It's not a bad idea sometimes if you can't work with Hebrew or Greek, the original language. Even if you can, it's sometimes good to have 2 translations, like the New American Standard and the NIV. That way you can see if there's any difference in the translation. That itself might raise to you that there is an issue or a controversy here. So, Ruth 1:1. Now it came about in the days when the judges governed that there was a famine in the land, and a certain man of Bethlehem in Judah went to sojourn in the land of Moab with his wife and his 2 sons. The author is giving you the opening setting, the opening scene. The important things here are what? The judges, the famine, right? A man. He's called a certain man. So he is particularizing this person. He wants you to know that he's from Bethlehem. So you say to yourself, well, what is there about Bethlehem? And what is there about Judah? You know, how important was Judah in the tribal groups, correct? And of course, Judah was what? Amongst the tribes? Was it lowest, highest?
One of the leaders.
One of the leaders, if not the leader, because they all understood that out of Judah would come the ultimate king. They were from, again, they sojourned to the land of Moab, so you got to say to yourself, all right, you know, what is there about Moab? And you learn that it's an enemy. But he has 2 what? 2 sons. So that's pretty good. Then the writer also chooses to introduce the names. The name of the man was Elimelech. The name of his wife, Naomi. The names of his 2 sons, Mahlon and Chilion. They are called Ephrathites of Bethlehem and Judah. Always remember that no information is provided to you coincidentally, without some kind of meaning. And of course, I hope you all got the email that I sent about the additional information. If you didn't open up your email, that showed you further hermeneutics to guide you in narrative literature, and there was a nice little section in there about the names of the book of Ruth, wasn't there?
Yes.
And Elimelech means what?
God is king.
God is king. And Naomi means?
Pleasant.
And Mahlon and Chilion?
Sickly and piney.
Sickly or piney, or, you know, frail and wussy, hard to tell, you know, mama's boy. We don't know exactly.
They didn't say all that.
No.
Well,
They said it was really sickly.
I'm bringing it up to modern day language.
That's how the message.
Wasting away. So, and you say to yourself, well, how did they get that name?
Right.
You know, and you can only conjecture. Was Naomi sick, real sick, during the birth process, which is sometimes true? I mean, when my wife Diana was pregnant with our first child, my son Dan, I thought I'd lost a wife rather than gained a son. She was so sick. So, you know, or were they, when they were born, sickly looking or sick for a long, who knows? But in the story, it's very providential. I take these as real names. Not what you end up having is people who don't believe that God has produced this literature through his prophets and people. They will say, you know, what a brilliant literary genre of this author to incorporate these names into the story and describing the character of these different ones. So, now, again, the famine tells us what? Biblical famines, drought, disease, locust, loss of livestock, etc., are clearly declared in the Old Testament as being judgments from God. But we also see that famines, God uses famines to develop his will in the life of Abraham and Isaac and Jacob and Joseph, don't we? So if they only had the book of Genesis, which they did have, they would have had knowledge of that, I would think. They would have at least understood, you know what? Famines don't have to be a bad thing. God used famines in all the patriarchs' lives and the son to advance his will. Of course, Elimelech doesn't take it that way. When it says that they went to sojourn in the land, what does that mean? What does that mean, to sojourn in the land? Yes?
My understanding is that it was like a temporary type thing, that they were going there not to live there permanently.
All right.
To be more like strangers in that land.
All right. So they didn't necessarily have the idea of being citizens.
Right.
But it was more than just a vacation.
Right.
They were going for a period of time to ride things out. Let's look on here. I'm just looking at some of my notes. Now, to sojourn in the land, in a foreign land, sometimes you have to ask yourself the question, well then what would their status have been? So, were they illegal aliens? Were they undocumented workers in today's lingo? So, did they have a green card? Did they cross the border legally? What status would they have had in the land? How much would they have been protected under those laws? And the answer to a whole lot of that is no. They would have been under Moabite oppression, Moabite practices. They would have been considered outsiders, so on and so forth. Now, verse 3. It begins with a then, so that's why I take a transition here. Then Elimelech, Naomi's husband, died, and she was left with her 2 sons. Right? This is a tragic statement.
Yes.
To lose your husband was what? Losing your breadwinner, your covering, your provision. But at least she has her 2 sons. But when you get your Logos program and you begin to click on different words, you're going to find that this Hebrew word that says Naomi was left with her 2 sons, the author has used a particular word pointing to the fact that tragedy is still coming and that the boys are going to be lost also, which it goes on to say fairly quickly, doesn't it?
Yes.
They took for themselves, somewhere along here, maybe after Elimelech dies, they took for themselves Moabite women as wives, the name of the one Orpah, the name of the other Ruth, and they lived there about 10 years. So does that mean they lived there 10 years after they married these women? I would say maybe, probably. You, of course, ask yourself the question, what are the implications of taking on Moabite women?
Well, the Israelites were warned not to marry foreign women because they also would tempt you to worship their foreign gods.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
It wasn't a law, though, for
It was
a Moabite from Canaanite. It was.
Oh, Moabite could take on a Israelite, you mean?
I mean, an Israelite could marry a.
No, they shouldn't have married.
Shouldn't, I mean, but it wasn't against the law, was it?
Yes.
It was?
Yeah, they weren't. The Israelites were not to marry outside of their covenant or their clans.
Interesting. 'Cause
So now, during time of war, if they took on, women as part of the booty, there was a process by which they were incorporated in. But there was a period of abstentia. There was a period of transition, and they could never, divorce them, and they really could not come to the full status. So, no, they were not to cross that ethnic or religious line.
Wasn't there also a special prohibition against the Moabites themselves in
Yes.
Deuteronomy because of they didn't when Israel was going out of Egypt that they
They wouldn't let them pass through the land.
Right.
And that's
So
the question of,
curse.
with the law forbidding this,
Right.
then how do you bring Ruth into the picture? So that's one that you're going to have to solve. Was Boaz's taking Ruth a violation of that Deuteronomic law?
One of the commentators that I read said that the law restricted them from marrying a Canaanite woman, but it was discouraged from marrying a Moabite woman. That was what I read.
Yeah. Yeah, we'll have to look at that closer, look at that particular text maybe. What verse did you cite, Ben?
I had let me look here. It was Deuteronomy. I want to say like 23. It was Deuteronomy 23, 3-6, which was more of against Moabites in general.
Have you got it there, Joe? Would you like to read it to us? Is that the right passage?
No Moabite shall enter the assembly of the Lord, none of their descendants, even to the 10th generation, shall ever enter the assembly of the Lord, because they did not meet you with food and water on the way when you came out of Egypt, and because they hired against you Balaam the son of Beor, etc.
Right. Now, when it says to the 10th generation, is it meaning the 10th generation of every Moabite, or is it talking about the 10th generation from the Exodus?
Oh.
See? From the time that the law is written.
Well, if David was only 3 generations from,
Well, he wasn't from the Egyptian when this proclamation was made.
Is it 10 generations from 1445
oh, okay.
to the point? See, this is where the commentators will get into it. Does he mean 10 generations from every Moabite, or 10 generations from that generation of Moabites that forbid them? Now, if you go 10 generations from the Moabites who forbid them to pass through the land, well, then Ruth is far enough down the line
Okay.
that you can say, well, she was beyond the 10th generation. You can also deal with the issue of, well, wait a minute, you couldn't take a foreigner with foreign gods into your assembly. But what commitment does Naomi make, Ruth make to Naomi
Your God
when she
will
comes
fight.
back? So she has a born-again, regeneration, Holy Spirit, indwelt
Amen.
conversion.
That's what I'm
Right?
talking about.
No.
That's what I'm
Preach it.
So,
Yeah, right.
Black people are Christians.
Ryrie, what?
He notes that Moabite was probably applied to the males, that women like Ruth could be proselytes and married.
Well, the text doesn't, I don't think, single but that might be another way of solving it. But we don't want to use born again, indwelt language for the Old Testament, right?
Right.
She became part of the covenant community of God's loyal love. So I'm filling in my notes as we go along with these kinds of comments. Then we passed by, both Mahlon and Chilion also died. The woman was bereft of her 2 children and her husband. Here again, greater tragedy, correct?
Yes.
Greater tragedy. What does Ruth mean?
Friendly.
Friendly, refreshed, a comforter. What does Orpah mean?
Gazelle.
Yeah, traditional thing is a stiff-necked or obstinate, but that's traditional. Pardon me?
Were they given these names
It's the name.
after the fact?
I think they were their birth names.
Yes.
Well, then why would, if they were Gentiles, have Hebrew names, or names with Hebrew meanings?
I don't know.
Moab's.
We have no idea where Orpah comes from. So, and Ruth, why? I mean,
Is coincidental, perhaps?
no. I mean, there was overlap in the sounds of ancient Near Eastern languages, but not in the writing of ancient Near Eastern languages. So just like we have Coca-Cola is Coca-Cola is Coca-Cola, there were names that overlap.
These like Hebraized names, perhaps?
Pardon me?
Like Hebraized names?
Mm-hmm.
Like we say Jesus, but
Yeah.
in Greek it was Jesus.
Right. Yes. Yeah. And of course, names could be transliterated into Hebrew characters with the sound. So they die, and now she's in real trouble. Now, does somebody have the New International Version out there? So you're not ashamed to admit it? Thank you, brother.
I've got 4.
All right, you got 4. Read for me Ruth 1:5 while everybody looks at their notes with Ruth 1:5 and the New American Standard Translation. Go ahead.
Both Mahlon and Chilion also died, and Naomi was left without her 2 sons and her husband.
What's the big difference there?
Bereft.
Well, what does his say?
Well,
It says
sons or
woman, that says
children.
Naomi.
No?
Woman and Naomi.
Woman and Naomi.
Oh.
See, this is the New American, this is NIV. Not a literal translation, but a dynamic equivalency. Is there a difference between the writer saying, then both Mahlon and Chilion died, and the woman was bereft of her children? What's the difference between saying the woman and Naomi?
As if she lost her identity.
She's losing her identity,
Yeah.
right? She's lost her husband. She's lost her sons. In Hebrew culture, or ancient Near Eastern culture at that time, you've lost what? Your identity.
Your names.
Right? Very, so these are things that if you have 2 English translations, sometimes you will pick up the differences there also. Right? Okay. Now the next section. 1:6 through 14. Certainly this is all one big narrative going beyond that, but I've separated out Orpah from Ruth. Then she arose with her daughters-in-law that she might return from the land of Moab, for she had heard in the land of Moab that the Lord, and of course this is very significant. This is the name Yahweh, the covenant name of God. Some translations will translate it Shaddai or whatever because they don't like to pronounce the word Yahweh of its sacredness, but that the Lord had visited his people in giving them food. So this is a big turnaround. I mean, for people who were very, very dependent upon the provision of the land, this was a big signal to them that we have a great change going on in the story. Verse 7, so she departed from the place where she was, and her 2 daughters-in-law with her, and they went on the way to the land of Judah. So Naomi starts back, right? Both of them with her. Naomi said to her 2 daughters-in-law, go, return each of you to her mother's house. May the Lord deal kindly with you as you have dealt with the dead and with me. Who would the dead be? Their husbands and maybe Elimelech. So these 2 have been kind to Naomi. And let me just look at my text here. We have the introduction of Hesed, the loyal love of God, with the words, you have dealt kindly. May the Lord deal kindly with you as you have dealt kindly with us. And this is a very standard principle in the Old Testament. What you sow, you reap. Or what goes around, comes around, as we will say today. Interesting, you might find in a commentary, they'll say, it's interesting that they say, return to your mother's house. Usually you return to your what? Father's house. For the father's house was the place of protection, was the place of going off to the next venture in life. Would the fathers accept them? What's the implication? I mean, is he a good Moabite and he's all upset that they married men from the other side of the grapevine or whatever? But the mother's house refers to a place at least of comfort. Yes?
Although the text doesn't state, can we, from the text and the time period which the 2 were married to the sons, consider that maybe during that span that the sons or Naomi taught about the Lord to the Moabite women, and that's why hence she uses the phrase "May the Lord deal kindly with you" because of perhaps some teaching.
I don't know.
Would they observe like the
What
Passover?
else would what they may have?
Okay.
I don't know. I mean, we don't see devotion amongst them.
Right.
Leaving the land, but yeah, they might have.
The reason why I bring that up is just because, it's interesting that Naomi says, may the Lord deal kindly, unless they who knew the Lord or had some understanding of who the Lord would be.
What else would she say?
Again, may your gods, right. But here she specifically says, may the Lord. Again, the text doesn't say.
Sure. And if the text doesn't say it, then it's maybe not vital to the story.
Okay.
But you certainly see Naomi wanting the best
For them.
Okay. And the story is also for the readers.
Right. I guess what I was saying is that would have that combining with the sons and say like Naomi's encouragement of the Lord through maybe like a Passover celebration or whatnot helped influence Ruth versus Orpha's decision to stay and go.
In that, I don't know.
Okay.
The text doesn't
Right.
lead me. I don't know if it's important conjecture, but it's certainly interesting to think about.
Okay.
So, Scott?
About the verse about go to your mother's house, is it possible that, as we see later on in the story, that Ruth is the one, the mother-in-law is the one that finds a husband for Ruth, or at least does the actions to get that, to make that happen? Is it possible that the writer is saying that the mother is the one who looks for, or at least communicates with tries to get the husband and the wife together, And so that's why she said, because later on she says, Lord, and grant each of you will find a home with another husband.
Right.
So could that be a reason why she says, go to your mother's home instead of...
No, because fathers were more the arrangers and the negotiators for marriage.
Okay.
Yes. Yeah. But she wants the best for these. These have been daughters-in-law for maybe 10 years. And I think what Naomi is saying is true. They have been loyal and kind and faithful to Elimelech, to Mahlon and Chilion, and also to Naomi, because Naomi's going back to the land, and these two girls are following her. Why don't they turn back? Are they going to be rejected by their own society at a certain point? We have to just keep asking those questions. But the prayer is a nice one. May the Lord deal kindly, again, Hesed, with you as you have dealt with the dead and with me. May the Lord grant you that you might find rest. What does rest mean? A place of security, of permanence, of freedom from wandering around. Each in the house of her husband. These are young women. Naomi doesn't want them to be for the rest of their life in the situation that Naomi's in, correct? Mm-hmm. Then she kissed them, and they lifted up their voices and wept. Very, very tragic situation. Now, how important it is in this passage to preach and teach about how mothers-in-laws and daughters-in-laws can get along. Right?
No.
I mean, this is vital to the text.
Are you preaching this?
Where else can we talk about mother-in-law and daughter-in-law relationships and how they need to get along?
You're going down a bunny trail.
Wouldn't this be great for a women's seminar?
Or Mother's Day.
Wouldn't you want Juanita Bynum or whatever to be giving us a shout on this? So, see, this is where a psychologist will go. Seeing the psychology and then run down the bunny trail or whatever and get lost from the text. Mm-hmm. So that's not what this is about. Maybe it's an application that you want to talk about after you've done the exegesis, after you've talked about Jesus, after you've got like nothing to do, and you got 20 minutes left, and you happen to see, some mothers-in-laws and daughters-in-laws not getting along. But, return my daughters. Naomi says, return my daughters. Why should you go with me? Have I yet sons in my womb that they may be your husbands? Right? Mm-hmm. Or I shouldn't skip verse 10. They said to her, no, but we will surely return with you to your people. Naomi says, return my daughters. Why should you go with me? Have I yet sons in my womb that they may be your husbands? What's Naomi referring to here?
The fact that the brother of the dead man was to marry the widow and have children.
Called what? Levirate marriage. Found in Deuteronomy 25, 5 through 10. So, this might suggest, as Tom mentioned, a stronger connection to them learning something about the law. I don't think that levirate marriage was unique only to Israel, but it was particular to Israel. It was a requirement. It was something that was mandatory. So Naomi's saying, are you going to wait around for me to get pregnant, married and pregnant again, for me to have a son, for him to grow old enough to then have him take you on? So it just can't happen. Just, not worth it. Ladies, that's your only option that I see. Again, this idea, was Naomi seeking a husband for Ruth, or was she seeking a redeemer for herself through Ruth? I think ultimately Naomi in this story has primarily self-interest. in her various actions.
You can tell that at this point? At this point, we can't tell that, can we?
Well, I can.
That's because you know the end of the story.
He jumped
Is it in Naomi's interest to take back 2 Moabite daughters-in-laws with her?
No.
No.
To have to support 2 daughters-in-laws?
No.
No.
It was bad enough she was going back without her husband and
Right.
2 sons.
Right.
Nonetheless, take back 2.
Well,
Yes.
I think it was more than that. If I was her, I wouldn't want to be taking back these non-Jewish
Exactly.
laws to a Jewish community,
Exactly.
let alone the financial part.
Right. And not only non-Jewish, but enemies.
Well, yeah.
So, Ben?
Yeah, I was just gonna say,
Go to the Baptist church.
I noticed that, I think I have to get rid of my outline because I focus so much on Ruth. But I noticed that towards the second part with the redeeming of Boaz redeeming, it talked more about Boaz redeeming Naomi and the property of Elimelech.
Right.
And Ruth was just a side note to that
Right, yeah.
versus.
But a side note of high interest to him.
Well, obviously, and Naomi knew that, but you can see more now how it was so much more of her, not, I don't know if you're going to say manipulating, but, pushing and using the right
But,
things.
maybe
She's
Ruth
being-
knew that too, because Ruth was fully committed to help.
Well, she
Well,
said, I'll do whatever you want
Yes,
me to do.
so let's keep going. All right? So we understand the principle here. See, without you expounding this and explaining it to the people, chances are they don't know about these things. Would you therefore wait until they were grown? Would you therefore refrain from marrying? All of these are a no answer. No, my daughters, for it is harder for me than for you, for the hand of the Lord has gone forth against me. I mean, this is a major theological statement. Neon lights. Don't miss this. The reader of that time would not miss it. This is how Naomi views her world. God is angry with me, and he has judged me. Verse 14, they lifted up their voices and wept again, and Orpah kissed her mother-in-law, but Ruth clung to her. Now remember, if you ever travel in the Middle East and somebody offers you something, you politely refuse. They will offer it to you again, you politely refuse. They offer you a third time, you take it. If you want it. If you don't, you politely refuse, and they know that you're not going to change your mind. You never accept it on the first time or the second time. It is the third time that you do it. Basically, we see that kind of process here with the girls. They have to say, no, we'll go with you. We'll go with you. That third time, that was it. And Orpah takes her cultural process and says, I'm out of here. Ruth hangs in there because that's her final decision. Now, we have a then again, which to me says we're into another transition. Ruth commits herself to Naomi and the Lord. My fourth section. Then she said, behold, your sister-in-law has gone back to her people and her gods. Return after your sister-in-law. But Ruth said, do not urge me to leave you or to turn back from following you. For where you go, I go. Where you lodge, I will lodge. Your people shall be my people, your God, my God. How many times I have heard this quoted at marriages, between a man and a woman. It's not between a man and a woman. It's between a mother-in-law and a daughter-in-law. And this is a tremendous commitment. Yes?
One of the commentaries, I don't know whose it was, back to 114.
You don't know who it was?
I don't remember which one I read.
All right, well, we certainly remember footnoting, so we don't have
Well, I have it
plagiarism.
here, I got it printed out.
All right, I'm much more comforted now.
But the clung, they said was the same word as cleave to your, so maybe they take it, would that be a interpretation of the marriage thing, where, man
Well,
leaves his wife.
see, that would be a great example of cross-reference, hop, skip, and jumping, because they aren't the same context. Now, certainly, Ruth, it closes out and says, that Ruth clung to her. The word can be also translated, she was faithfully devoted to her. But all I'm saying is, it's not a marriage context. If you want to talk about a marriage context, go to Ephesians 5. Right there it's explicitly spoken about. But Ruth said, "Do not urge me to leave you or to turn back from following you. For where I go, for you go, I go. Where you lodge, I lodge. Your people shall be my people, your God, my God." So we see 3 levels at least of commitment, don't we? I'm committed to being with you. I'm committed to your community of people. And I'm committed to your God. Verse 17, "Where you die, I will die." This is a lifelong commitment. This was the responsibility of sons, correct? To bury their parents. And I will be buried there. That means family. "Thus may the Lord do to me, and worse, if anything but death parts you and me." She invokes the God of Israel to be the accountable person over her, right? In this situation. So we see quite a commitment here. And again, she is a Gentile. Apart from Rahab and Naaman, and maybe Nebuchadnezzar, although Nebuchadnezzar is not explicit, she is one of only maybe 3 Gentiles from the Old Testament that we see clearly confessing loyalty to Yahweh. When she, Naomi, saw that she was determined to go with her, she said no more to her. Nothing more could be said. Verse 19, "So they both went until they came to Bethlehem. And when they had come to Bethlehem, all the city was stirred." Again, it wasn't a big place. "Because of them. And the woman said, 'Is this Naomi?'" Now, we might ask the question, why is it that they don't recognize Naomi?
Been a few years.
Been a long time, she's not looking so good.
Been at least 10 years. Maybe she's not looking that good.
No husband, no sons.
No husband, no sons. Wouldn't expect her to see him without the men.
And she's got Ruth with her.
Right.
She got Ruth with her. How do they know fairly soon that Ruth is a Moabitess? Remember, as you study your cultures, people dressed according to their culture, according to their religion. She would have had the T-shirts that would say,
All I got was his name.
Born
You know.
and raised.
Moabitess, or Chemosh answers prayer, or something. I don't know. Chemosh was the main god of the Moabites, or Chemosh is the way, the truth, and the life. I don't know. So trust in Chemosh. But they did. When you study the culture, you will find that the tribal groups had different shades or different colors, different ways of dressing. Maybe Naomi's coming back and she's not dressed like an Israelite anymore. When I travel in Egypt or other Arab countries, I don't wear America is the greatest T-shirts. Some years ago, taking some college groups and everything, the guys, some of them had this army fatigue stuff, like an army of one. So, guys, we don't want to be telling that to all the cultures that we're going to. They're not as thrilled with us, that type of thing. So when I go to Egypt, I don't wear my Israeli sweatshirts or T-shirts or those types of things. Go ahead.
Isn't this guy, is this Naomi? That doesn't necessarily mean they didn't really recognize Naomi, but
Well-
what a changed person. Is this Naomi? The
Yeah.
Naomi we know,
I thought it was more of the spirit of her.
and they know that Elimelech and Naomi left without taking Israelite women with them, so if the woman comes back with Naomi, they pretty much know she's a foreigner.
Well, why would they say, is this Naomi?
Is this the woman they call pleasant? Or, to me,
Well,
it's
they-
a disposition.
But the people would not have been thinking of the interpretation of the name, I don't think.
No, but you might say that.
But she
You ever seen someone here,
responds.
they walk in, is that Bob?
She
He
responds.
sure doesn't look the same, but I know it's him.
Well, and that's the statement is, as they are raising the question. Now, did they know this was Naomi? Probably once they got closer and everything. But is this really Naomi? I mean, no. How is she dressed? Who is she with? She left with a husband and 2 sons. She's back here with a Moabitess. There could have been, certainly after a 10-plus year period, with, aging or whatever. And remember, their face and everything was not something that was particularly visible. Now, I'm sure they would have seen Naomi's face being a married woman, but they're pretty much covered where you don't see much. So,
I also think that what she says in the next 2 verses, 20 and 21, gives a little bit better indication that they probably did recognize her as Naomi, else she wouldn't have said what she said in the fact that it says, "Do not call me Naomi." So I think
okay.
No,
Question is, what with this short phrase, what is the writer raising?
right.
This is a different person.
Yes.
What's happening?
Something's happened.
Yes.
And then Naomi's response. She said to them, "Yeah, I'm Naomi. No, do not call me. Do not call me Naomi. Call me Mara. For the Almighty has dealt very bitterly, marily with me." Right?
Right.
We can change a Hebrew word into an adverb, but L-I-N.
Yeah. Well, one's Mara and one's Mar. So, one's a noun and one's more adverbial. So, and you don't see that in the English. I mean, if I were to translate this, I would say, "Do not call me Naomi, but call me bitter. For the Almighty has dealt very bitterly with me." Then you pick up the nuance. Or, and I'm sure most commentators do, if they have Mara, then they'll have a footnote, or I would put Mara and then in brackets put bitterly to just help people. This next statement, "I went out full, but who? The Lord has brought me back empty. Why do you call me Naomi, since the Lord has witnessed against me, and the Almighty has" what? Afflicted me. See, this is the great drama of the opening chapter. Verse 22, "So Naomi returned, and with her Ruth the Moabitess, her daughter-in-law, who returned from the land of Moab." I mean, how many times does he have to say it? Moab, Moab, Moab. He wants them to particularly get that. "And they came to Bethlehem at the beginning of the barley harvest." Now, when's the beginning of the barley harvest? End of April? Yeah, late April or early May. We know that from the Gezer or Gezer calendar that we found. Yes.
Can there be more than one though?
Barley harvest?
Yeah, in Israel
Can there be more than one
with their climate.
beginning of the barley harvest?
Well, there would be more than one barley harvest in a year.
But no, not the beginning of barley harvest.
I see what you're saying. Beginning of the barley harvest versus beginning of a barley harvest.
Right. I mean, the barley harvest goes on. They harvested wheat multiple times more than they did barley, but this is the very beginning of the barley harvest. And the barley comes before the wheat, which was the better product, as I remember. The wheat was usually 2 to 4 weeks behind the barley. But, got to make the beer before you make the bread.
Right.
That's a good sermon.
How do we, yeah, quick question?
Yes.
How do we know in the prior verse 121, how do we know that she is bitter in terms of bitterness of blaming God for her state, rather than somewhat bitter, as was talked about earlier, that maybe an Elimelech let the family right out of the land, and she is bitter about the consequences that have come to her family?
Because she says to her daughters-in-law, it's harder for me than for you, right? Why? For the hand of the Lord has gone forth against me.
Right, but if she was an individual that understood the law and the consequences, right, the Lord's hand going against her would be exactly what they deserve. How do we know that she's necessarily embittered about that action and blames God for
I went out full, but the Lord has brought me back empty. Everything's blaming on the Lord. Wouldn't you say?
I don't know.
The Almighty has dealt bitterly with me.
But
I don't know if
is that
she-
just a recognition, I think is what he's getting
Right.
at, or is she really blaming
Is
God?
she
just
describing
recognizing
this-
the sovereignty of God, this is the way he's made me for an
Right.
act.
She's blaming, she said
She said it 3
afflicted.
times.
Yeah.
And I would agree. I mean, the writer incorporates 3 statements by her, all saying the same thing. We might say, God is angry with me. God has judged me.
Right.
God has taken my husband, my sons. I left Bethlehem full. I've come back empty. The hand of God is against me. And what do you think it means?
How does that, in my mind, that doesn't necessarily mean that she doesn't discern that that is exactly what she has coming to them.
Well, now, if she discerns that that's exactly what's coming to her, then why is she bitter? Why wouldn't she be repentant?
She's mad as heck.
Why would she be defiant?
What's the defiance?
Don't call me Naomi.
Well, yeah, I mean, again, you're the person telling us to stick to the scripture. I can't.
Well,
see it
I just quoted it.
Well, you're
But
reading it, but you're
Joe,
putting
she
emotion
said it
in
3 times.
Yeah.
You guys are,
Well-
you can have your view. What I'm trying to explain is,
Right.
I don't know if it's descriptive or prescriptive, right? For me, I kind of read this and see descriptive of what God's actions were in the face of disobedience, okay?
And you
What
think she's resigned to that?
What you are taking it to mean as prescriptive of, in addition to that, I'm angry at God for doing that. I get that, but I'm telling you I see a difference.
Well, the fact that she says it 3 times, that she sends her daughters away, tries to send her daughters-in-law away from Yahweh. If she had an attitude that I'm wrong, and this is what you're suggesting, her mindset is, I'm wrong, my husband was wrong, the judgment that God bestowed on us was right,
I'm
that
saying,
I'm repentant.
I
Is she
think-
repentant in your thinking?
You know, it's a good question. I'd like to think about
All right. All right.
Yeah.
Well, my take on it is that this is this woman is hurting. She is angry with God. She's telling other people, don't follow me because God's against me. Don't call me pleasant because there's no reason to be pleasant because God's against me. And he has afflicted me. I mean, those are strong words to me. They're not words of, I sinned, I'm repenting, and God's...
Puts the active verb on God. God has afflicted me.
Right. Yes. Now, we have completed 1 chapter. Everything that we've talked about is exegesis. We've done an exegesis. We have an exegetical statement for 1 through 22. It's divided into 5 sections. Now you say to yourself, All right. How do I convert this to a sermon? How do I make this homiletics? Now, to me, again, homiletics is packaging it so that it is relevant to the audience. But homiletics should never replace hermeneutics or exposition, or you'd go too far. So, give me a big idea. You know, Robinson talks about a big idea. Matthewson talks about a big idea. The gentleman's teaching the class in Cambridge, Tim Warren talks about the big idea. Everybody talks about, what is the big homiletical idea that you might have come up with for this as a sermon? Who would like to give me a homiletical idea? All right, I'll throw one out to get us started. Why do we blame God when things go wrong? Or why do we blame God when we do wrong? Could that be? What other approaches would you take to packaging this as a sermon?
Why is she being punished when she feels that she is a good person?
Does she feel like she's been a good person?
Well,
Our choices have consequences.
Now, remember, you've got to have a homiletical idea that fits the exposition. So is the main thrust of it, poor Naomi, punished unrighteously by God?
that's what she feels.
What are some other homiletical ideas? How did you package this?
How did Elimelech disobey God? What were the consequences?
How did Elimelech? Now, why would you focus on Elimelech when he's gone after 3 verses?
Well, my particular sermon was 1 through 5.
Oh, okay, yeah,
Yeah.
I see. So if you're doing 1 through 5, you could focus on Elimelech. Maybe. Even though Naomi lasts out the 5 verses. Yes?
Does it have to be a question?
No, it could be anything.
Okay.
There's tons of
I don't
homiletical
know.
spins.
All right.
Is that
Well,
what our-
There's only one exegetical right thing. But the homiletics can be a lot of different things.
all right, I don't know, but Ruth's declaration of loyalty to Naomi and God,
That's your sermon homiletics?
like that would be like, yeah.
All right.
For chapter 1.
Okay.
But, you know, I was focusing on Ruth so much.
Uh-huh.
I may have lost.
I know. I think you veered off on the M14 and you're out in Jackson when you were headed to downtown Detroit or Cleveland. So, yes.
I put down, I said, Naomi's initial condition becomes empty and her faith weakened by the deaths of her family members.
Right. That's good exposition or exegesis, but it's not homiletics. It's not that next step. Now, I personally don't care if you take that next step. The next class will. You know, and I'm a maverick maybe here in the long-term teaching. Any other homiletic ideas?
Why
Yes.
is God seemingly abandoning Naomi?
Why is God seemingly abandoning Naomi? Now, and you want to put seemingly in there, okay?
I do.
Yes, because you want to keep it open. You don't want to say, why has God abandoned Naomi? It looks like it from her perspective, right? So, but again, that's good, the exegesis part, maybe even exposition. But the other step to the homiletics is what you'll need to think about. Yes?
What about returning home?
Returning home. What does that mean?
Now you want me to think.
Yeah, that's right. So returning home.
That she
Whenever you find what goes around
that she
comes
had
around.
left trying to, when her husband left trying to escape
Uh-huh.
from the punishment, and she comes back repenting
Right.
Return
Oh, you think
the
she's
faith.
repenting by the end of the, see, I don't see her repenting by the end of this
Well,
chapter.
I'm just trying to
So,
think of-
well, I understand. Uh-huh.
How about what goes around comes around?
What goes around comes around, what does that mean?
Well, from Naomi's perspective, I think she's made choices and there's consequences of
All
it.
right. Well, you can have a homiletical idea. Consequences, choices bring consequences. That could be a homiletical sermon. You know,
Write these
The
down.
virus of disobedience, maybe.
the virus. Why would you use the word virus?
Disobedience breeding disobedience.
All right.
Abimelech to the sons, to the Moabite women, to...
Okay, the consequences of bad decisions could be a homiletical. So, yes,
What about something like having faith during difficult times?
faith,
During difficult
and where is the faith
time.
in this chapter?
Well, I mean, well, she, as far as Naomi, we see that she had faith in, faith in God, not necessarily.
What kind of faith?
Well, I mean,
Where do I see that faith?
well, in her prayer. I mean, not to say that she had,
Faith in your return.
You don't want your audience to have that
it
kind of
wasn't like a
faith.
redemption.
Is she returning to the Lord or returning to the barley?
You're right. Good question. Good question.
I mean, I personally don't see any repentance.
But it's a confession when she said that God had done bitterly with me. She's confessing that what she have done, she has gotten her punishment.
You think she's acknowledging that God is right in what He's done?
Blaming.
You know,
No.
again, I don't see, if she is saying, don't call me Naomi, call me bitter, because that's who I am. I don't see repentance
I think
myself.
The
But did
beautiful
she-
thing about this.
Go ahead.
I'm
Didn't
sorry.
she add the reason why she's calling herself bitter? Because the Lord
Has dealt, yeah, I have an unjust God. I've got a God who has dealt with me, and again, the words that she uses here,
The Lord has witnessed against me, and the Almighty has afflicted me.
you know, witness against, afflicted, dealt bitterly with me, the hand of God is against me. So, Scott?
I was just saying, I think what the author is trying to say is that, through what I'm reading, is that even though Naomi feels that God hates her so much, God is going to show how much He still loves her and how much He...
Do you think
And
that
how-
at
what
this,
he has a plan
do you
for.
think at this point in the story that Naomi is assured of God's love?
No.
Well, that's the hard thing with this division is we're kind of just hanging out there with Naomi being bitter and we went to a commercial break.
I understand.
But we didn't, because at the very end, and maybe I put too much weight on it, but at the very end, it talks about how a new season is beginning, how everything is starting again, and how that is where we're going to take off and new hope is going to start. I think the writer does that specifically.
Well, he didn't break up the chapter.
He didn't break it up, but
Well, we broke it up, but he does state that the Lord has visited. So there is a statement that blessings are coming back to the land. Is there any indication from Naomi's point of view that blessings are returning to her? I mean, why would she tell her daughter-in-laws to go get lost if she really thought by coming back that she was going to be back into the blessings of the Lord?
Yeah,
I
she'd
think
give it up.
Naomi knew the culture.
Pardon
She
me?
knew her culture. She knew that she had land, and somehow she had hoped that she would be reinstated.
Now, if she didn't have daughters-in-law, she had no way to get
That was her
a Hebrew
land.
son.
That was her land still.
No, it wasn't her land until it was redeemed.
There's no kinsman redeemer if she doesn't have any daughters-in-law.
Well, let's get back to the homiletics. See, you got to go now, if you're going to be a homiletician, according to Robinson, and I think there's lots of room in there, particularly if you're guest speaking or something, you have to put something on there. Well, what about this one? Why do we blame God when things go wrong? Is that an all right homiletical idea? Does that have nothing to do with the text?
That seems more appropriate for Job.
Didn't you say you put
Well,
in this too?
is it then inappropriate for
it's-
Ruth?
No, because Naomi experiences a lot of the same things that Job experiences.
So
So,
we
right.
don't get an answer in chapter
Pardon me?
1. We don't get an answer for that in chapter 1.
Well, we can ask the question.
Yeah, but that's the truth, though.
Well, the answer is, why do we blame God when things go wrong? The answer is,
We should.
we shouldn't.
No, Naomi did, right.
Well, we can pose any question to any text like that.
No, but it doesn't, it is not, I mean, and it's all right if you don't like it. I'm just trying to throw out something for us to evaluate. But does not, in this chapter, 4 times, Naomi blames God.
Yeah.
Never does Naomi say, I'm a sinner and I'm wrong. You don't have any clear declaration. Everything that she says to the other people 4 times is, why is God doing this to me? Why are my bad circumstances caused by God? Or, give me another homiletical idea.
Do we blame?
That was part of the assignment. Pardon me?
I think it's better, do we blame God?
You could say, do we blame God would be fine to raise that. Or do you blame God when things go wrong?
I think that fits better.
That's fine.
Does it seem like you've been, maybe that's taken a little too far, does it seem like you've been abandoned by God?
Right. Well, you could, do bad circumstances mean God has abandoned you?
But
But we don't know how, I mean, I don't know how she's lived, hasn't told us that, for 10, 12 years. Has she been still faithful to God in that time, in her faith?
If she were faithful to God in those 10 years, why would she still be in the land of Moab?
Well, that's where the sons were,
Why were they in the land of Moab?
because that's where Abimelech took them.
Why did they marry foreign wives?
Well, yeah.
I mean, everything that they do seems to be a violation of faith or trust in Yahweh.
She has an attitude of, what I sometimes see in a lot of Christians is woe is me. They don't look at their own lifestyle and what's going on, but rather, I'm a Christian and God should be blessing me, woe is me, nothing goes right for me. I don't know how you,
Well, but we don't want to talk about Christians
well, no.
right
But I
now
mean-
until we bridge it in
But I can-
application.
Okay, but I can see where she's got this attitude is nothing's going right.
It's not her attitude. Nothing is going right.
So-
It's reality.
So it is a woe is me chapter.
For a lot of people, they think nothing's going right, but it's not reality. So, yes.
Could we have something like this, messed up,
Messed up what?
a messed up situation?
It's too ambiguous. Doesn't
Yeah,
fit the text. It isn't. The big idea has to be tied in to the major players. When bad things happen to you, do you blame God? Or can we blame God when things go wrong? I mean, that I think is and then you can turn the the homiletics of the other ones if you want to. 1, 1, and 2. Forsaking God is never good. 1, 3 through 5. Death does not mean defeat. I mean, you can turn each one below that into homiletics if you want.
Isn't that dangerous?
Well, I don't know if it's dangerous, but you're stepping away from the text, and I'm a person who doesn't like to step far away from the text on a regular basis. And you can hash that out in, with other professors. Because yes.
So then, towards the end there, when it talks, the whole section talking about Ruth's loyalty, does that end up just being kind of a side note versus? Because I've always kind of understood that
All right.
people made more.
Is it a side note, or is it the
setting up for
the author giving us a contrast? See, Who is Naomi? She's a what?
A Hebrew.
A Hebrew. Ruth is a what?
By the foreigner.
Who's supposed to be trusting God?
A Hebrew.
Who's supposed to be believing in His covenant?
A Hebrew.
You see, remember in the characters, in the extra stuff I sent you, it talked about watching the characters, watching their contrast, how they play off of each other. So here in this story, the living ones is a Jew, a proselyte, and a pagan. The pagan goes back to her gods. The proselyte, Gentile, commits herself to God and to the loyalty of her mother-in-law. The mother-in-law is angry with God and wishes her daughter-in-law would just go back and wants to forsake her. Again, when Naomi and Ruth are done with their debate, Naomi just shuts up and takes off. If you're going to follow, you're going to follow. I'm not going to win this argument. So, but I hope you're getting some insight into what you have to do with the text. You can't spiritualize the text. You can't Christianize the text. You can't hop, skip, and jump around. You got to preach the text and develop the text, because everything that's important is in the text. And if you go to the commentaries too soon, you don't know what the text is saying. So, now, let us go on to the next chapter just briefly. And now we have Boaz protects and provides for Naomi and Ruth. That's my summary of 2:1 through 23. And for right now, I'm sticking with it. Do you have a homiletical idea for this section, 2:1 through 23? Somebody throw out a homiletical idea for this section. 2:1 through 23.
Seeking God's providence in a godly way.
Seeking God's providence in a godly way. So you might say, how to seek God's providence in a godly way. Mm-hmm. That would preach. Some others? If you don't have one yourself, maybe one that you've heard from a friend that we could analyze. What about God helps those who seek to help themselves? God helps those who help themselves. God helps those who seek to help themselves. Would that fit at all?
It would. Is it a good theology?
Is it from the text?
Well, in the narrative, but then do you say this is applied directly to if you go help yourself, God was guaranteed to help you?
God helps those who seek to help themselves. Is that a un-Jewish, untheological? I'm not saying that God helps every person who seeks to help themselves. So maybe you need to include God helps those who seek Him in helping themselves.
Yeah.
And of course, what does help mean too?
What does it mean to you?
Well, what does it mean to the text? Or I'm saying, this is I think this is kind of the struggle that I had, was that because I sometimes feel like, yes, God dealt with Ruth in this way, but we can't use this scenario.
God deals with who?
God dealt with Ruth.
Who?
Or Naomi.
There we go. I see that thou art close to salvation. Uh-huh.
He dealt with Naomi and with Ruth in a very, by allowing her to find
Just can't let go of Ruth, can you?
Okay, and
All right.
Boaz shows mercy to her.
Uh-huh.
Okay, but we can't necessarily apply that that God's going to deal with me the same way today.
Well, certainly not. This is a Christian era.
Right, and so that's what my struggle
Is there not a great theological statement here, though? And again, we're homiletics. We're trying to package it into homiletics.
Right.
Yes, Tom?
I was going to say maybe something as simple as family members helping family members.
You could talk about that. I don't know if you didn't want to include God in it.
Well, again, it was just
No, we're only refining it. God helps family as family helps family.
right.
God blesses sincerity. I'm saying that from
Godly sincerity, then?
Well,
Who's sincere?
I know the one that's doing the work in
See,
this chapter.
here again, I think we have to explore in chapter 2, is Naomi seeking God, Yahweh, or is she seeking to restore herself and her circumstances? Is she really pursuing Yahweh yet? Or is she just pursuing her own better outcome?
I think she's looking to bring in support into the household.
That's it. Livelihood.
Right.
Well,
Taking care of herself.
Yeah, day
And
by
in
day.
that case, you can say that Boaz was the ram in the bush.
That Boaz what?
Was the ram in the bush.
He was a what?
The ram in the bush. Boaz, because he's the one.
Well, who's the ram?
Boaz.
Where's the ram come from?
You know how there's always some help. The Lord always send you some help.
Well, then why don't we say that? Boaz is God's help.
Okay.
The ram in the bush, are you referring back to Abraham and Isaac? Is that what you mean? Yeah.
Old Testament.
Yeah, but, yeah, Old Testament. At least we're in the right. Yeah. But I mean, what you want to do is not use figures of speech that someone might not understand. I mean, truly, preaching to non-believers or teaching to non-believers is a great exercise because you learn to move outside of our Christian lingo. This is what I enjoy about the evangelistic Bible studies that I do at businesses, is I got people that know nothing, and all of a sudden, I'm teaching spiritual kindergartners and having to say everything as simply and clearly and basically as I can. Well, we convert this to homiletics, however it goes. God helps those who see. Go ahead, Ben.
But this is what I have the trouble with, is by making God helps those who help themselves. Aren't you in essence saying that this is proof that God will help you if you help yourself?
Well, and that's what I say. We can modify it by saying God helps those who seek Him to help themselves.
But even that, I don't know.
Do you not believe that God helps those who seek Him?
Well, I don't think that God has to help those who seek Him.
Seek me, knock.
What do you mean? What do you mean?
I'm moving to the New Testament, but is there anything in the Old Testament
In the Old Testament, yes.
where people are seeking Yahweh Elohim, the loyal covenant God, and He forsakes them? He does not help them?
No. I guess maybe I'm thinking that more in terms of when I sit here help, I'm thinking more of like prosperity type thing. I'm hearing prosperity.
Well, then they're not seeking Him, are they? They're seeking prosperity.
Okay, so if you're saying seeking, so if you're saying seek, because it looks like prosperity in the sense of because she is extra blessed by getting the ephah or whatever of grain, because Boaz watches out for her.
Well,
And so,
and this is why I raised the question of, is she really seeking Him? So, but maybe a better homiletical idea is God provides provision and protection in spite of our unfaithfulness.
Yes.
Maybe that's a better way of saying it.
I was looking at something like privileges and responsibilities. How could we,
Privileges and responsibilities?
yes, because Ruth was given some privileges and responsibilities.
So, and you'd have to say to yourself, is the main chapter then about Ruth receiving privileges and responsibilities? Because your homiletical idea has to be built off of your major exegetical premise. So,